Welcome everyone to a Blueprint Career Services Industry Insights panel, the publishing industry. First, I'd like to do an access check in the chat. If you can let us know whether or not you're having challenges hearing me, if you can see the presentation clearly, and if there are any other access needs that might affect your participation, again, please do put that in the chat. We are recording this session, and if you would like to access it afterwards online, please go ahead and do that. Great. Thanks for your feedback, everyone. Thank you. First, I'd like to do, before I begin, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. And for thousands of years, it's been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Great. So next I'd like to quickly introduce myself. My name is Ann Park. I'm the career strategist with Blueprint Career Services here at University of Toronto School of Continuing Studies, Blueprint Career Services. And I'd like to share some housekeeping with all of you. As I mentioned before, please remember to keep your cameras and mics off during the presentation. Post questions and comments in the chat. Questions will be responded to at the end of the moderated question portion. As we have a record number of participants with us today, it's likely that we won't get to all of the questions. If your questions are not answered, I will review them and send them to our panelists, and we'll do our best to respond to them and share them on our website. Please complete our very brief survey at the end of the presentation, and note this session is being recorded and will be posted on our Blueprint Career Services portal. Great. I would now like to briefly introduce Blueprint Career Services and a bit more about what we do here. So in addition to the Industry Insights and Real Talk panel, which is similar to the Industry Insights panel, except that we introduce specific topics as they relate to employment, we also have something called the Clifton Strengths Workshop, which is a 3-hour workshop and includes an assessment that identifies your top 5 themes, and we discuss how we can use your themes to develop them into strengths and help you to elevate your careers and effectively market yourselves to employers. Next, we have something called the Career Wayfinding Series workshops, which is loosely based on the Design Your Life principles, in which we look at the career searching journey in a very methodical and planned out way using design thinking principles, and really it lets you feel in charge, in the driver's seat of your career. We also have something called the Alternative Careers Workshop, Part 1 and 2, and this workshop helps you to explore and identify alternative careers. Perhaps you were working in a profession, and for whatever reason you decide that you need to switch gears and go into another career. So that's what that's about. And of course, we have our career nav and our one-on-one career strategist sessions in which you'd be working with me. I'm the facilitator of all of these wonderful offerings here at Blueprint Career Services. But with the career nav sessions, I would work with you to identify your goals with regards to careers and your challenges, and together we'd work to overcome these challenges together and help you to achieve your career goals. For more information, please do contact us at ses.blueprint@utoronto.ca. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our amazing panelists with us today. First, I'd like to introduce Sam Hiyate. Sam Hiyate is keen to discover new voices and help writers prepare their works for the market and to help them build lasting careers. At his agency, The Rights Factory, he's worked with colleagues to discover and develop works with a number of writers and help put them on bestseller lists. Sam also teaches a literary agent's guide to getting published at U of T's SCS, so he's with us, one of our amazing faculty, and is the host of the podcast agent provocateur, giving a behind-the-scenes view into publishing and agenting. Let's welcome Sam Hiyate. Hi, Sam.
Hi, everybody.
Next, I'd like to introduce Janice Zawerbny. Janice Zawerbny is an executive editor at HarperCollins Canada. Janice has worked as an in-house editor in the Canadian publishing industry for more than 25 years. She began her publishing career at Coach House Books, followed by positions at several Canadian independents, including House of Anansi. Anansi, I got
Yep,
it.
yep.
Anansi, even though I practice. Anansi, where she was senior editor, Canadian fiction, and Bibliasis, where she launched a new nonfiction book series called Untold Lies for marginalized voices and untold stories of Canadian history. Janice has edited a wide variety of award-winning and critically acclaimed fiction and nonfiction books in Canada, including fiction, The Break by Katerina Vermeet, The Best Kind of People by Zoe Whittall, Five Little Indians by Michelle Good, and The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters, and nonfiction, Bushrunner by Mark Burry, winner of the 2020 Charles Taylor Award for Creative Nonfiction, and the best-selling essay collection Truth Telling by Michelle Good. Janice is also the co-founder of the new Canadian U.S. Award for Women Writers, the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction. I'd like to give a warm welcome to Janice Zawerbny. Hi, Janice.
Hi. I'm sorry that was so long.
It was great. No, thank you. Thank you for helping us out by providing us with such an amazing bio. And last but not least, we have Anuja Varghese. Anuja Varghese is a Pushcart Prize nominated writer and editor based in Hamilton, Ontario. Her work has been widely published in Canadian and international literary magazines, and her debut short story collection titled Chrysalis was released last year. Chrysalis won the 2023 Writers Trust Dane Ogilvy Prize and the Governor General's Literary Award for Fiction. Anuja is a recent graduate of the U of T's School of Continuing Studies Creative Writing Certificate Program. I'd like to give a warm welcome to Anuja. Hi, Anuja. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great. So now I am going to ask some questions to our amazing panelists. And so I'll begin with my first question. My first question is, how did you get started in the publishing industry? What has been your career trajectory up to this point? Anuja, would you mind answering this question first?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'm coming at it from both sides. So primarily as a writer, but also on the publishing side, I am the fiction editor at the Ex-Puritan magazine, which is a Canadian literary magazine. So that's kind of where I fall in the publishing landscape. So if you are submitting short work, fiction, the Puritan also accepts nonfiction and things like that as well. That's more where I'm coming to. But I came to that starting out just as a volunteer reader. So I sometimes, if you're looking for ways into the publishing industry, which can sometimes feel very closed off, I literally just applied and started out as a volunteer reader, got a sense for how a literary magazine works, what kind of work they were publishing, which not only helped me get my own work published in other magazines, but also then opened the door to move up into the role of fiction editor.
Thank you so much, Anuja. I just find it so interesting that you were able to carve a career for yourself as a successful writer by, part of it is, of course, by thinking outside the box and volunteering. And this helped you get your foot in the door. And this is interesting because, to be honest, I never thought about this approach for writers. I know I often talk to job seekers about the importance of volunteering, but I never specifically thought about that for the writing industry. So this is very helpful. Thanks, Anuja. And Sam, what about yourself? I'd be interested to find out about your career trajectory. How did you get started? What has your career trajectory been up to this point?
I'll try to make it brief, but because it could be a really long story and could take up most of our session, in fact. But so I was like an immigrant kid to Toronto, and I studied English literature, and so I love reading and I love books. And then when I got out of college, I ended up kind of making my own job. I had this really boring job at a life insurance company, and I was so depressed. And then I basically started a literary magazine without knowing what I was doing. And then I was so excited because the very first issue got reviewed in the Globe and Mail. So I said, maybe I'm doing something right. They said it was a cool magazine, and that gave me the encouragement to keep going. So I spent 10 years spending almost every single after-tax dollar that I had making the magazine, and then beautiful little books that nobody bought, because publishing is hard. It's hard to make money at it. And then I got recruited after the first decade of break even, basically, by an agency. And then I realized that being an agent was almost as much fun as being a publisher, because I didn't have to worry about actually selling the books. I would just, that the publishers had to worry about that. I just had to find the writers and get it to them. So that's basically it. And I haven't looked back right now. Our agency's growing. We've had a book on the New York Times list for the last year and a bit, and we had 2 books a couple of weeks ago. So we don't see ourselves as being a particularly Canadian agency, where even though half of our clients are Canadian, we probably have a couple of hundred clients now. I've lost track of it all, but we have a lot of great new agents that are joining. So that's the exciting thing for me now, about 30 years in, is finding new agents, helping them find new writers, and just doing things on a bigger scale.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam. And for you, I think, it's oftentimes a lot of us find ourselves in jobs that are not exactly the most thrilling and don't provide us very much personal, professional satisfaction, but we might be doing something on the side, whether it's writing, or creating, magazines, or just, well, that's kind of rare, but literary magazines, but just, our side interests, and sometimes they blossom into careers, and we find out that, okay, this thing that I really love doing could actually be a career for me. So yeah,
Oh, it saved my life for sure.
wow, that's so interesting. So if you find yourselves in a position where you're working in a job that's not exactly the most professionally and personally satisfying, there's hope, right, Sam?
There's hope. It's not easy. I worked 9 to 5 one job, and then 5 to 9 at another. So
Wow. Wow. But you need to put in the hours. How about that? You need to put in the hours and do the extra time, and it will come to you eventually. So thank you very much, Sam. And Janice, what about yourself? Can we hear a little bit about your your career trajectory and how you started in the publishing industry?
Yes. So I knew when I was still in university that I wanted to work in publishing. So, I did my undergraduate degree and I did a graduate degree. But at the same time, I also was taking courses simultaneously at Centennial College and did a diploma in book and magazine publishing. And then what I would do is during my summers, I would intern at publishing houses in the editorial division and it was low paying. Some of them were not paying. And I would work and get experience that way during my summer months. And I had a part-time job at a hospital from the age of 16, and I kept that job even for almost 6 years after I was already in publishing. I kept it on the weekends just as this is my safety. And so, so yes, I maintained my other job. That wasn't really what I wanted to do, but I kept it. I did both of them until I finally felt secure enough in my publishing career that I could let go of my hospital job.
So it's interesting that you mentioned, again, similar. It makes me think of also, how Sam started out, but maintaining that safety job, because as we know, this industry, along with all of the other creative industries, to maintain to earn a living, to earn a living, to be honest. It can be quite challenging, to say the least, especially when you're getting started. But if you can all have a safety job to help you provide for your basic living needs, and provide you ways to pay for those things, then it allows you to focus on what you really want to do. But again, it's a matter of making those sacrifices. And I think, I can say this with a lot of confidence, that your passion for the writing industry has helped to fuel you to where you've gotten today in your careers, and helped you to put in those extra hours. So
Well,
it's
and I'll
Go ahead.
also, sorry for interjecting. I'll also say that like most writers also have another job. Most writers don't live off of their writing. So they all have a secondary job. They teach or they do something else. It's very few writers that can live off their career in writing, especially in Canada. So if you're a writer in the audience and you still have another job, that's completely normal.
Mhm. And I think about, I appreciate that. And I think about there's so many ways that writers, that some of my most favorite writers have used their day jobs to help inform what they write. And it adds that depth of being surrounded by different experiences. And again, it helps to inform the work that they do. So thank you for sharing that, Janice. I really appreciate it. I'm going to ask the next question. I'm going to ask Sam. Sam, as the publishing sector can be competitive, how would you recommend that interested candidates get their foot in the door? I'm assuming that there's probably so many folks out there in the audience who are doing everything that they can, putting so much time and effort into their writing, and trying to get their works in front of a publisher. But how do you get your foot in the door? What are some tips? What are some suggestions that you have, Sam?
Well, you've heard from both me and Anuja and Janice. Janice didn't mention her literary magazine experience, but we all three of us have literary magazine experience. And I think Canadians are really lucky that because of the Canada Council and the Ontario Arts Council, that there are probably 100 literary magazines in the country, and they're all looking for you. Their main mandate is to find new people to justify the grants they're getting. So because what they want to do is find you before you become Michael Ondaatje. And then later on, they'll say, we found Michael Ondaatje. We found For me, I can say, for example, in my magazine, I discovered Sheila Heti. I published her very first story back in 1999. But so literary magazines, as a new writer, they're waiting for you. And I think you should try to submit your works, find the good match, do the research, send your stuff out. Getting into a literary magazine a few times helps you then get grants. And this is the other thing about being Canadian. So we have the lit mags that are funded, and we have more grants than any other country for writers. Now they're looking for literary writing. So if you're writing like the next Stephen King novel, it might be a little tricky to get money for that, because they will judge you on the artistic merit of the work. But that aside, those are two ways to get you kind of motivated. And also, it's encouraging. You get a piece published in a magazine, and sometimes you get a relationship with the editor saying, send us more stuff. And then you start building essentially you're building a case for a book at some point. It could be short stories that get you started. If you're working on a novel, places like the U of T school and other writing schools in the country, I highly recommend it. I'd say half of our clients have either an MA in creative writing or an MFA in creative writing. A few of them have PhDs in creative writing because they're going on an academic track to kind of protect themselves, right? The thing about academia is you have that doctorate, and then you can do more things. But an MFA even will usually allow you to teach creative writing. So I don't know if that gives you kind of like a brief entry point into what I'm thinking.
And I had a question, like, are we talking about how to like get published, or are we talking about how to get a job in publishing, or are we talking about both?
I Both, but I would assume that most of the folks out there are probably interested in getting their works published. So I know, Janice, that you have expertise and knowledge to share in both areas. Would you mind sharing some tips that you have, or some suggestions in addition to those wonderful suggestions from Sam? get yourself into literary magazines, and doing so will help you get grants. But anything additional to this advice, Janice?
Well, I think that's good advice for writers and for people who want to work in publishing. I mean, if you want a job in publishing, doing something, and there's different departments, you don't just have to be an editor. There are marketing and publicity and sales departments and art departments. And so there's lots of different jobs available in publishing. And I think that volunteering at a literary magazine and getting to know the business, or a small press. Canada has a lot of small presses, is a great way to get experience as well if you want a job in publishing. And of course, I mean, there are a lot of internships. Most publishing houses have internship opportunities available, paid internship opportunities, but it is highly competitive. And to get your foot in the door, you would have to have taken a publishing course usually. Ryerson has one that I used to teach at. I sort of teach at. My class hasn't restarted after the pandemic, so I think I'm still employed there. So you can, or there's Centennial College. I mean, a lot of the colleges now have publishing programs, so they do expect that you have at least a rudimentary foundation, before coming in and doing an internship, because there's some things you kind of need to know. So that's another way of sort of getting your foot in the door with publishing in Canada. I mean, when I was coming up, I mean, there was a really great program that's not available anymore by the Ontario government. And that program, which is the one that allowed me to work in publishing houses in the summer, was by the Ontario government. And what they used to do is, if you were a student and you wanted to work in the arts, so it was not just publishing, it was publishing or film and TV and some other areas, they would pay half your salary. And you'd have to go, and there's no guaranteed job. You'd have to go and submit a resume, and then the publishers or the people in the arts industry would come, flip through the resumes and call you in for an interview for the internship. So it was competitive. It wasn't a guarantee that you'd have a spot. But if you did get a spot, it was a better than average paying internship, because it was paid half by the government and half by the publisher themselves. And of course, they've discontinued this wonderful program, which was a great way to allow people to get into the arts and to get experience. So maybe I don't know, we need to bring this back into the government arts programs, because it was a really great way of doing it. But yeah, volunteering or doing internships is another great way of getting a job in publishing.
Great. Thanks so much, Janice. So again, volunteering, publishing, volunteering and internships. That's great suggestions. Anuja, how about yourself? Did you have anything to share?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of especially submitting, just starting to build that publication history a little bit if you are submitting to literary magazines. First of all, like what I always say to people, speaking from the ex-Puritan anyway, we get somewhere around 1,000 submissions each quarter, and I have 3 fiction spots. So just to keep that in perspective, when you're worried about getting my foot in the door, getting published, all I'm getting is rejections, all I'm getting is form letters. Very often that has so little to do with you personally, the quality of your writing, and more to do with, like, somebody else do the math on that, because I can't, but like whatever 3 spots out of 1,000 submissions is, it's it has very little to do with you and much more to do with how much space I have, what's going to be a good fit in that particular issue, things like that. So that's always the first thing to keep in mind when you're worried about, how do I break into this? Keep trying, keep trying, keep honing your work, try and make it the best it can be. Make sure you have other people looking at your stuff before you're submitting it. Don't rush to submit, all those kinds of things. And at some point, it is a bit of a numbers game when you're starting out anyway, right? You may submit the same piece to 20 magazines to get 19 no's and 1 yes, but the 1 yes is all you need. So don't give up. Submit to lots of places. Most magazines will take simultaneous submissions. If they say they don't, they do and don't know it. Like, just submit your work. You know what I mean? And then sort of building on this idea of volunteering, really CamLit is a very small community. Um, and aside from your own like independent writing that you're doing alone in your home, get out there, be part of the literary community, you know, go to festivals, go to conferences if you can, do online workshops, meet other writers where you live, join writing groups, see what's going on at your library. If there's a writer in residence, meet with that person. If you can find a mentor, do that. Everybody at some point in this community is connected. Editors know each other, editors know agents, agents know writers. So in some way, if you can be part of the ecosystem, that's going to help you get your foot in the door. If I have 3 spots and I see a name I recognize, or if some other magazine editor sends me something and says, hey, I don't have space for this issue, but might be a great fit for you guys, I'm so much more likely to read that piece than something that comes out of the slush pile. So that kind of like literary citizenship can be a huge boost.
And Anuja, I'm just wondering on that note, as there is so much competition, and yes, it's important to keep putting yourself out there and engaging in different activities in the writing industry, because it sounds like there's so much that you can do in Canada, in Ontario. But how do you stay motivated? Because as someone who's an artist, um, putting yourself in a vulnerable position, putting your heart and soul
Mm-hmm.
into your work, and then submitting it and trying to get your foot in the door and getting so many rejection letters. From
Yes.
your experience, and I'd love to hear from the other 2 panelists as well, how do you stay motivated and not let all of the very normal and common rejection stop you from pursuing a career, or pursuing a career in the publishing industry, or pursuing a career as a writer? What do you suggest? Because it's so hard.
It is hard, for sure. It's hard. So I have uh, 2 things. I guess the first thing is I always say everybody needs 2 camps of people. So you need your camp of cheerleaders. That's the people in your life, like your friends, maybe your family, maybe not. But like the people who are going to say, regardless of what you do, what you write, what you create, that is amazing. That's the best thing I've ever read. You should send that to the New Yorker. You know what I mean? Like those people, you need those people in your life, and they're gonna always tell you you're amazing. They're gonna boost you up. They're gonna help you move past those rejections and keep going, and remind you like that you're great and you love what you're doing and you should be doing this. We need those people. You also need a camp of people that are more like your literary people, your writing people, sort of the people that are going to be able to give you that more constructive feedback, some like the criticism that helps you make your work better and maybe move on from that rejection to an acceptance. Those are often not the same camp of people, but you need both to make your work better and to hopefully keep.
Oh, you're frozen. Frozen. I hope you can come back, Anuja, because you're providing such valuable information. I'm going to ask Sam. Hopefully, Anuja will come back soon. I'm going to ask Sam the same question. Sam, how do writers? What would you suggest that writers do to stay motivated in this? Oh, you're back. Oh, good. Okay,
Oh,
you're moving. You were
sorry, did I
frozen
freeze?
just for a bit, and it was right after you were providing the amazing and valuable information. But did you have anything else to add? Because you were suggesting different camps of people to support, different camps of people to support you. And did you want to add anything before? That was when you became frozen.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm just saying, yes, you need your camp of cheerleaders who are going to really support everything you do and love everything you do and keep you going. And then you need a camp of sort of more literary folks, the people who are going to be able to look at your work a little more critically, and hopefully provide the feedback that's going to make your work better and keep you moving forward. But you need both of those, that really encouragement, positive, all that stuff, and then that more critical eye, I think together help you keep moving forward.
Thank you. That's amazing advice. Sam, did you want to add to that? How should folks stay motivated in this highly competitive industry?
I think Anuja got most of it, but I think I want to just point out about community, because I think Anuja started on it, but she was more like camp. There's like the love camp, and then there's a more critical camp. So writing is a solitary act, and writers need community. And so places like the U of T Continuing Studies Creative Writing Program, where I've been doing, I guess, for maybe 15 years now, the course on writing from an agent's point of view. And there's so many great instructors that are there. The thing about the courses, and even beyond the courses, having the courses give you a community, because so many people end up staying together and becoming a writing group because they meet through these programs. The thing about a community and a writing group is it gives you a bunch of things. The first thing is it gives you a deadline. If you're part of a writing group and you're like, okay, well, I promised I'd give them something. So now I have I'm down to the last 24 hours to write something for tomorrow. So you stay up all night and do it. So then you've got the deadline, and you get the feedback, assuming you're with a good group. And my advice is always try to get into a group where everybody's better than you and has more experience, because obviously you have to have the talent. So they'll say, oh, we'll have you in. We see something in you. But then you'll get all this mentorship, and maybe you'll make some friends out of it. But that doesn't have to happen necessarily. If they're giving you good feedback on your work and encouragement, that's really important. So, feedback, encouragement, deadline, and just a sense of belonging. Because, I read somewhere that 80% of writers, especially if they're writing poetry or literary fiction, are depressed, so get out of your head, get out of bed, start writing, talk to people, go for a coffee. And the funny thing about writers is, because they are always alone, they don't want to, it's funny, a lot of them don't want to talk about anything other than their writing. So it's perfect to have writer friends, because nobody else is going to care. They're like, it's like, oh my God, how was your day? It's like, I spent the morning taking out a comma from my piece, and then I spent the afternoon putting it back in. So.
Thanks, Sam. So community is very important in helping to stay motivated in this highly competitive industry. Janice, how about yourself? What are some tips that you have for folks who are interested in breaking into the publishing industry, whether as a writer or just in the publishing industry as well? Because it is so competitive. How can people stay motivated? What would you suggest?
I think it's been well covered now by the last two answers. I don't think I have any more to add. I mean, but I do say that I agree with Sam and Anuja that community is really, really essential. They're meeting people and making those connections to other people in the industry is great, just in terms of feedback, but in terms of that terrible word of networking that people hate, but it's true. There is a network out there, and even if it's an informal network of people that you meet by going to, and go to events too, go to a reading. We have one, the Toronto Festival of Authors that could use more people in attendance. And there are writers hanging out there. There are editors. There are people in publishing. There are lots of events that you can go to and participate in. And if you keep going to them, you're going to start becoming a familiar face and meeting other people. And then you make small talk with someone. And then, it is a community. So you have to participate if you really want to make some inroads.
Thank you so much for that, Janice. Oh, please.
Can I add one more? Sorry, can I add one more thing that I thought of? I just wanted to throw out there, especially when I was, submitting stuff lots. One thing I always did was have more than one thing on the go, because I found that if you work so super hard on one project, you have all your eggs in this one basket and you send it out, if that comes back a no, if that comes back a no 20 times, that's huge heartbreak, right? But if you have 1, 2, 3 other possible ideas, projects you're working on, something you're working on collaboratively, something you're working on for fun, you always have other creative pockets to tap into. And I think that can also be really motivating.
That's great. That's some really great advice, Anuja. Thanks for that. And I'm just starting to think about a little bit also with regards to other, where to focus your energy, in fact, kind of along those lines, similar but different. So Janice, I'm going to ask you this question. With regards to writers specifically, how much time should writers spend networking and self-marketing versus writing, actually writing. So if you could just suggest, for example, you would let us know if you would suggest that writers spend, 60% of their time writing or 60% of their focus writing, and then 40% of their time networking and building those connections and really focusing on the self-marketing piece. I'd like to hear your perspective because I can see how it would be a difficult balance, especially if you're in the creative industry. I'm assuming that you're not naturally a a business oriented kind of person. At least I would assume that most wouldn't be. But Janice, what would you suggest that writers do, or how much time they should focus on?
I don't know that I can break it down into perspectives because the fact is if you're a writer, you're writing. Like writers write. That's what they do. That's what they love to do. They do it all the time. Really passionate writers. I think there's that other side of it, which is, the networking, or if you're self-publishing, marketing your books or submitting your books. I think it's something that happens simultaneously. And I think, I mean, I'm not a writer, so I can't really say, but that's what I would think, that they sort of happen in tandem with each other. I don't know if that's enough of an answer. Do you want to answer that?
I thought it was good.
Okay.
So I am a writer, and I can tell you, there's absolutely no like percentage breakdown that's going to work for everybody. And if you see anything like that, that's like every writer should be writing every day, every writer should be spending X amount of time doing X thing, like it's not, there's no formula like that that's going to work. There's no one size fits all thing. If you are a writer, you're going to write in the way that makes sense for you. You're going to network in the way that makes sense for you. I have a full-time job and 2 kids and friends that I try and see, right? So I'm never going to write every day at a certain time. Some people need that kind of scheduling, but like I write in pockets. I edit in pockets when my kids are like at piano lessons. You know what I mean? Sometimes I write at midnight when everyone else has gone to bed and no one needs anything from me. So I think everyone just needs to find kind of the thing that works for you to like be your creative self amidst the rest of your life. You know what I mean? You have to work your writing practice into your life in a way that makes sense for you.
Thanks, Anuja. And Sam, did you want to share? Did you have any additional insights to this question?
I think we should move on. I'm worried about time.
Let's move on then. Sam, let's start with you. I'm just wondering about some recent trends in the recent trends in this sector because, for example, I know I'm aware that if you write a particular genre or a particular topic that's current, you might more likely be picked up by a publisher or an agent than maybe a topic than if you're a writer of another topic or another kind of genre. Any trends that you think that writers should be aware of that will help them get picked up?
The biggest trend in the publishing world now internationally is this thing called romantasy, which is a strange word. It was invented in Germany. I first heard it at Frankfurt like 20 years ago, and all the editors are like, we're looking for romantasy. I'm like, that's not a real word. But the Germans like to concatenate words and create their own, like, so it's, and now you can see some of the biggest books in the world that are selling, like bestsellers, are like Sarah Maas and other writers are writing that. And we only have 1 or 2 fantasy writers, but I know that the publisher of one, which is Orbit, which is part of the Hachette book group, they're so excited about it that they're just throwing money at us to say, when can we get the romantasy? We want a 3-book. Like, they don't even want 1 book, they want a whole series. And so like, it's great when a publisher comes to you and they're like, what is it going to take? How much money do we have to give you to do this? We're like, oh, we'll think about it. And then, we have, in that case, it's an author with a newborn. So we're like, we have to feed the kids. So we have to pay the mortgage. So as an agent, we're always thinking about what does the author need, especially over 3 books, which is like a huge commitment on both parts. But so romantasy is big. I've noticed also that in general, science fiction and fantasy have become huge before the romantasy thing. There's if you're looking at, and I think a lot of it has to do with TV, like the 3-body problem is coming on Netflix. Dune was a book that was written in the 60s, but because it's about, like the whole planet is a desert, it's kind of, there's all kinds of issues about water and climate change. It's actually really relevant now. despite the kind of political intrigue, which is universal. It's been there since the time of the Roman Empire to now. Now it's like Donald Trump is the bad guy, and he's a great bad guy because he might actually become American president from prison, which is like, how do you run the country anyway? So there's always that stuff. But so I think those are the two things. And I think the third thing that is interesting is I've noticed in the last maybe 10 or 15 years is that Canadian writers have really jumped into genre. They've embraced genre in a way. And there's what's his name, the writer who writes horror under one name because he wants to have the ability to be seen as a literary writer with another name. So you know, science fiction, horror actually is another thing. I talked to a couple editors in New York, and they're like, we really want horror, and they want, this is interesting for all of you women writers, they love the idea of women exploring things like feminist ideas in horror, because then it's like the combination of a novel ideas and showing how women are dealing with it. Because there's been, like, Stephen King, even like Carrie is a good example, but he couldn't write that now in the same way. He showed you how a young woman dealt with stuff. I think it would have to be a woman writer that does that now, female writer. So they're looking for that. But he kind of jumped in there with his you know, back in the days when you could write a female character as a guy. I think right now everybody's looking down on that. Like, why is this guy writing this from a female point of view? So
this is so insightful, Sam. And I'm sure this insider information will help so many folks out there. I'm reading in the chat, and it's comforting to a number of our folks out there. Panelists, I'd like to actually switch things up a little bit, because I realize that we have 1 o'clock scheduled for the time that we review questions from the chat. But because I'm just looking at the chat right now, not surprising, there are so many amazing questions. I would like to amazing questions from the chat here that I'd like to review them now, and try to address as many questions as I can. So we're just going to start a little bit early because they're incredible questions. I want to make sure that the needs of our participants are being met. So let's just switch it up a bit. I'm going to go to this first question that we have here posted in the chat. So just to the folks out there, again, we're going to be reviewing, sharing questions from the chat to our amazing panelists. And if you'd like to put questions in, you can certainly go to do that now. For the questions that we don't get a chance to review and share with our panelists, I'll review them, and hopefully our panelists will have the opportunity to answer them. So our first question from the chat is, if you have pieces published in magazines, how do you then approach agents and publishers? So any of our panelists who'd like to answer this question first, that would be great.
I mean, I can start, but you know, Sam's an agent. I mean, you have to go out there and find an agent. You have to do a lot of research. You know, there are a lot of agents out there. There are a lot of different agencies. They all are looking for different things. They have different taste, just like editors. They have, they're looking for different kinds of books. So I think you have to first go out there, do some research, go look up the literary agents and what they want. And then you have to see if they're looking for the kinds of books you're writing. And I think if you publish in magazines, that's actually really great. That's a great thing to put in your cover letter and your pitch letter to an agent, because it means there's something good going on with your writing because you're getting published. And it's a very positive thing, even if you haven't had a book done yet, just to have your work published somewhere, whether it's a literary journal or a magazine. That's a really great indicator to an agent that, you know, you have some talent, and it would really help get their attention is what it would do. I think that answers the question.
Thanks, Janice. Would any of our other panelists like to share their insight on this particular question?
I can add that to follow what Janice said, everybody should do their homework, because I can't stress enough how different every agent and agency is. There's going to be somebody out there that will match what you're doing and really get what you're doing. That's what you really want. So if you've got a certain kind of book, the trick is to do the research to figure out who else has done something similar, and or who, based on your your work? Whose other aesthetic criteria might match through their book deals and through their clients or clientele? It's tricky to actually find this information. Like back before the internet, I'd always tell people, you just read the acknowledgments at the back of the book and figure out who the editor and who the agent was if it's a similar book.
I still tell people to do that.
So nowadays, though, there's so I'll just give you the tool that we use every day. Actually, it's a tool called Publishers Marketplace, and it costs some money to subscribe, but it's worth doing when you're ready to find somebody, because what you can do is just subscribe for a month, and you have access to a database that goes back to about 2002 until now of every single book deal in the English language that was bought. It lists who the author was, what the book was about in like one sentence. That's all they give you, who the editor was and who the agent was. So, and I mean, you could do that, publishersmarketplace.com, but just outside of that, if you want to do something for free, because that will give you a searchable database, like if you have a historical novel, you're like, who's doing historical fiction? You know, it'll give you that answer. Who's doing thrillers still? And it'll give you a list of the agents, and then you have to go to their website. And most agencies now will have their specifications and requirements and their contact info on their website. And there's also something called Query Manager. You should look into that if you don't know it. And Manuscript Wish List are tools that publishers and writers use. Most editors are on Manuscript Wish List because they're saying, these are the 3 things I'm looking for right now. And agents too. I'm not on either because I'm too old. I never really got into it. I started this a long time ago. But a lot of the younger agents are actively on these tools and doing things online. So the other thing is you have to figure out a way to write the best pitch letter that you can, which is a query letter, which is, this is what my project is. This is why I think you like it. And this is who I am, in like a very brief note. And then every agency will say on their site whether they want you to just send them the query first, and then they'll tell you yes or no, we'd like to see it. At our agency, we're very open, and we also we can't assume that if you're a brilliant writer that you're a brilliant pitcher. So what we'll say is, send us your query, but send us the first 3 chapters so we can look at the work, because sometimes the work is really good but the query is mediocre, because writers, being an advertising writer is very different than being a poet, even though sometimes if you're Salman Rushdie, you've done both. I think that's it. There's lots of resources on finding a query letter, writing a great query letter. There's also a website by a woman called Jane Friedman, Friedman, who used to be the publisher of HarperCollins in New York. And when she quit, she said, I want to work closely with writers. And so she has a great website that has all kinds of resources about queries and about proposals and about just how she updates it all the time. She gives a lot of talks. She's written a book about publishing. So there are a lot of online resources. Don't be afraid to just Google, how do I write a great query letter? You'll probably get 2,000 results, but you go to the ones that call to you.
Thanks, Sam. That's great advice. Anuja, did you have anything to add?
I think the only thing I would add is that it's worth it maybe to think about kind of what your project is, and like, do you need to go the route of getting an agent? I think agents are wonderful and great advocates for you as a writer, but if you're not, perhaps don't have like a super commercial project or something that might be a great fit for a big 5 publisher, there are many sort of mid-size independent Canadian publishers that have submission windows where you as the author can submit your manuscript without an agent. So as an unagented submission, you still need to have that great query letter Sam was talking about, a great sort of package for your work, good comps, all that stuff. You need to have all of that ready, but you can submit directly, and then your relationship is directly kind of with the editor at that press. So just sort of making that decision of where you're going to sort of pitch your work and how you want to sort of tailor your approaches for each one, right? It's never going to be, I've made this one template query and I'm going to send it to 30 agents or 30 publishers. You want to really tailor it for everyone you're submitting to.
Thanks
it's like
for
when you
that.
send out like a resume and a cover letter, right? The cover letter has to be specific to the job. Like, what is it about your interest and experience that matches it? So I think it's very similar.
Yeah.
This is such wonderful inside information. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to throw out the next question from Jenna. Jenna says, I'm a copywriter by day and a tech policy analyst by night. I love journalistic writing, and I take refuge in fictional writing sometimes. I am also a newcomer who is based in downtown Toronto, and I struggle in making connections with people in the fields in a new city. Any tips from our speakers or attendees? Attendees, if you can just share your tips in the chat, but specifically for our speakers. Any tips?
I mean, if there are tons of writing and publishing and book events happening in the city all the time. And so I think it's a matter of going online and subscribe, I don't know, joining some groups online. I'm not on social media, so I'm the worst person to talk about this. And so going online and finding out what events are happening and start going to those events. There's lots of them there's launch parties and reading events and things like that happening all the time. I think that's what the questioner is asking, but there are ways to go look at a website of the publisher or their social media sites and see what events they have unfolding that week. There's lots of stuff going on at bookstores and event spaces across the city at all times.
Speaking of which, I'm going to invite all of you in Toronto to one right now. So next Tuesday, we have the launch with Random House Canada of a big graphic novel by a Toronto writer illustrator called Maurice Fellacoup. And it is a graphic memoir. It's like a doorstopper. It's like 500 pages. It took him 10 years to do. It's a big graphic memoir about his life growing up. He lives right now on Toronto Island, which is, for all of you who are in Toronto know, it's impossible. Somebody has to die and not have a will for you to get a house there. So it's kind of, but then again, he has to take the ferry if he wants to come into the city. But it's at the Lillian Smith branch of the Toronto Public Library on February 27th, which is next Tuesday at 6 o'clock till 8. You can meet Maurice Fellacoup, and he's going to be talking to the guy who runs the Beguiling comic store, who has been a friend of his for a long time. So it's a kind of queer coming of age graphic novel by a local writer, and it's published internationally. Pantheon in New York, who does Mouse and Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi, they bought it, and then Random House Canada said, we got to get a piece of this. He's Canadian. So they joined later. But anyway, so there's an invitation if you're interested in graphic stuff, memoir, queer stuff. Maurice is your guy. So I'll see you there. I'll be there. So if you want to just come and meet me outside of it, just say, Sam, you told me to come. Here's my pitch. And I'll be like, oh my God, you got 2 minutes to pitch me, because there's a lineup of 50 people.
Sam, can you please share some basic I appreciate that sharing. Can you share some basic information? I'm just going to type it in the chat. So how do people sign up? Where, when? If you could just repeat that quickly, I'll quickly type in the chat to share with everyone.
Oh, you don't need to sign up. It's a public event. Are you talking about this event or something else?
Yes, this public event. So it's a public event, and they can just show up. And where and when is this again?
The public library at College, I think near College in Spadina, right? It's the Lillian Smith branch, 239 College Street in Toronto.
Lillian Smith.
Somebody's put it in the chat, I think.
Oh, they did. Okay, okay, great. Okay, so okay, that's wonderful. That saves me the work.
If you Google it, you'll see it it'll be on Random House Canada website, but also Amazon.ca. It's called I'm So Glad We Had This Time Together, which is, for those of you who are old enough like me, you'll remember that's how they ended the Carol Burnett show.
Right. Hey, Sam, right? That was my favorite part. Just hi to grandmother. Anyway, thanks for that, Sam. That's wonderful sharing. Anuja, did you have anything to add to this conversation, this question?
So I will add an invitation as well. And so awesome. this kind of ongoing things at like almost every bookstore in Toronto has events going on. Type Books, Another Story Bookshop, lots of great stuff there. I'll be at Type Books on Sunday doing a book chat with a couple other authors. Again, free public event, stop by, say hello. I think that's 6:30 on Sunday night. The other thing I will throw out there is to check out websites like, especially if you are a newcomer, if you are a BIPOC person, check out Diaspora Dialogues, check out the Writers Union of Canada every year does a conference called BIPOC Writers Connect. So I got to go to this conference kind of pre-pandemic. That's where I met my first mentor. It's kind of a day of panels. They pair you with a mentor who will look at your work, suggest next steps. You can meet funders, meet other writers. And it's really great, especially for emerging BIPOC writers. So I would recommend those things.
Those are great suggestions. And Anuja, if you could just clarify, I know you're going to be there at an event at Type Books at 6:30 on Sunday night. I know of there's a Type Books near me. And I'm just share where I live, but which location, which Type Books are you going to be speaking at on
Type
Sunday night?
Junction.
Junction.
Yeah.
Might just drop by. Okay, so I'm just sharing that information.
That's part of Junction Reads, which is an ongoing reading series in Toronto. So if you literally just Google like Toronto reading series, and the like 5 or 6 good options will come up for just to go and like hang out, meet people. And I always thought, like, when I first started kind of doing these kinds of things, I realized that you kind of feel like you need like an invitation to go to kind of be a part. We've just given you 2 invitations, but like, if you don't know anybody, it sometimes feels weird to just show up in a space and like be like, hi, like, I don't know anybody. I kind of want to be a writer. Do I belong here? Yes, you do. And everyone kind of feels like that. So honestly, just go introduce yourself to people, talk about what you're working on. You will inevitably find people who are interested and start building those connections.
That's so encouraging. Thanks so much, Anuja. And I have a question from Sarah, specifically directly that she would like to ask Sam. Sam, when do you think a writer is ready for a literary agent?
Anuja mentioned something earlier, which I want to kind of reiterate, which is you have to have like, this is how literary agents get paid. For those of you that don't know, we're not being paid by the publisher. We're not a scout for the publisher. We get paid out of your money, the author's money. So you have to have something that you have some confidence is worth money to somebody. It's particularly hard because we pitch a lot in the US, and the Americans are brutal. Like if they like a book, they have to do a profit and loss for the book, where if they're a hardcover publisher, they have to show that they're going to sell 30,000 copies in hardcover. Otherwise, their bosses will say, no, do it again. Show me that how we're going to make money on this. Now, that's theoretical. The reason that why they make it so hard is because most of the times they're going to fail, and they know that. So, but that's basically what you're up against in the US. In Canada, we're lucky that a couple of people have mentioned this, but outside of the big 5 publishers, which are the names you know, HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, Penguin Random House, there are 80 small presses. Some of them are very regional. There'll be like somebody in like the Prince Edward Island or something, or just focused on their little local area. But a lot of them aren't. So there's, for example, Goose Lane Editions in Halifax, the 2 beautiful little books. And Coach House has risen in prominence from a kind of tiny press that reinvented itself after Coach House Press folded to be Coach House Books now. And because of Andre Alexis and winning the Giller and selling 200,000 copies of that book or whatever they sold, they now have money. And similarly, a press like Cormorant Books, which is run by Mark Cote, they took a chance and they did the Marrow Thieves by Sherry Dimeline, which has been a big book for them. So these presses have showed commercial success. So I guess you kind of have to have confidence that there will be some money there, and that it's the best book you can write. Because the last thing that I want to get, which I get this a lot, is people that send me something that it really isn't ready. And I feel like, yeah, this isn't, it's uneven, or the story doesn't really make sense. So you have to, this is why I keep stressing community and writing groups and courses like the U of T's program. Sometimes, I mean, we've gotten, this is a plug for the program, but we've gotten people that have come out of the program where one of the instructors will say, Sam, you're my agent. This person was a really bright student in my class. Can you look at it? I'm like, okay, well, because it's coming from somebody that I trust, it's a personal referral. We'll read it. We'll say, this is great. Like, we want to talk to this author. So I can't stress the value of that. I think Anuja really made her point about having the community and the friends and the mentors and everything. But the other thing, which I've also mentioned, is that every agent is looking for something specific. So I'm actually not looking for romantasy. I go totally against I don't believe in trends. I will tell you what the trends are, but the success is like Maurice Velacoop has nothing to do with anything except he's a brilliant writer and artist. And yeah, I mean, none of us expected him to take 10 years to do this book, but it's finally out. And because nobody's told the story before, I think it's going to be part of the canon, because there is no graphic novel except for maybe Alison Bechdel's book about being queer that's a graphic novel. There's a couple other, there's like maybe one or two. So one of the things, this is an important point that agents look for, I'm sure editors too, is that if you're telling a story that is in fact so original that there's only a few out there already, that's a good sign. It means that we can put it out with some confidence. That, you know, your originality, your own voice. I have a penchant for people that are funny, sad. If you've seen the show Fleabag, like that's exactly, if you can write that, just send it to me right now. Because I think a lot of the human condition is funny and sad, right? Like life is a great tragedy because you know it's going to end, but we try to make it meaningful while we're here. So every agent's looking for something different. So you need to do your homework, and you shouldn't really try until you're ready, I guess is my main point. And you're ready when everybody says, yeah, this is great. Like everybody around you, including Anuja mentioned the people that are your cheerleaders. So that's your partner, you know, or your kids or your parents or whatever, and your best friends are like, I read it, it's brilliant. But you can't, that's like half of the story. The other half are the people that are in the industry, like your mentors and teachers and fellow writers, especially if they've gotten published, their opinion will really count.
Thank you for that, Sam. So try when you're ready. Interesting. Great. The next question I think would probably be best for Janice to answer. This is from Josephine. Josephine says, I've made such a hard decision and decided to invest in myself and create assets based on passions I've been dismissing for my 20 plus years in tech. One path is to write a serialized poetry book. I absolutely love poetry, and after doing a creative writing course at U of T, I realized what a fool I was not to give this more attention or simply believe in myself more. I've been investigating the path of self-publishing on Amazon KDP. Haven't actually invested time to submit anything to actual publishers yet. What's the opinion on self-publishing, Janice?
Well, I don't know that much about it because I work in-house, so I'm completely the opposite of self-publishing. I'm in corporate publishing. But I will say that there's a huge there are thousands upon thousands of writers that go the route of self-publishing. There's nothing wrong with self-publishing. It's a great way to get your books done and out there and to develop an audience. I mean, there's the most famous, I guess, self-published author right now is like what's her name? Colleen Hoover, who published her books, did self-publishing and then was picked up by a mainstream publisher when they realized what a huge audience she had. So I think they're pretty self-directed, and I think those I think Amazon has their own self-publishing there's a number of ways to self-publish out there, and I think they're self-guided and they have very good instructions on how you do that. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with self-publishing. There is an audience for all different kinds of books, and it's a great way of developing your core base and your audience, and actually just getting your work out there in the world for people to see. So I'd say go for it.
Go for it. Thanks, Janice. The next question I actually liked, I think Anuja might be the best person, or what a great person to respond to this. This is from Anita. So Anita asks, specific to memoir, would you say that the publishing industry is more likely of interest in a traditional style memoir submission? And I'm thinking that you'd be a great person to answer this because I know that you're working in publishing as well. But yes, so would you say that the publishing industry is more likely to have interest in a traditional style memoir submission, or is the industry more likely to be interested in a unique style, i.e. memoir and stories? Would you say that the industry at this time is conservative or more out of the box thinking? What are your thoughts on this, Anuja?
Oh, I think I'm probably not the right person to
Janice.
ask. Yes, because I don't write memoir, and no one is submitting their memoir typically to a literary magazine. So I will let Sam or Janice take this.
I mean,
Yeah.
Go,
Janice,
Sam.
you go. Okay, I'll go because I do a lot of memoir. I've done so we get a lot of pitches for memoir, and most of them, and I hate to say this, people think their lives are really interesting, but they are not. So and I hate to be the bringer of bad news, but most of your memoirs will never, unless you want to self-publish it or do something for your family and the people that come after you. That's great. The most successful memoirs that I've done, like for example, I did Wes Hall's book, um, um, no bootstraps when you're barefoot. He's the guy on Dragon's Den now, but we actually worked on the book before he was on Dragon's Den. And what was interesting to me was he wrote a piece about being a Black guy in Toronto who, after the killing of George Floyd, had never really felt Black in Toronto. But then he felt, he's like, wait, this is serious. Like, I'm a successful business guy. I live in Rosedale. And he said at one point that he didn't even feel comfortable if like an old white lady had some kind of an accident outside of his house. He's like, if I go and like, if I try to help, somebody's going to call the cops. So he published a piece in the Globe that I read, and I called him and I said, let's do a book. And so that's an interesting story that nobody else could tell. So a lot of people have, like, I survived cancer. That's not really that interesting unless there's an amazing story behind it. And so my test for memoir is if you can imagine your story as like a Hollywood film, that there's something that interesting and unique about your parts of your life. And it's not biography. Some people think that they start from like the cradle to the grave, you know, like that's a biography. That's like people that are already dead. Memoirs are usually it has a starting moment that's dramatic, and it has like an end, and it's usually within a couple of years. Most of them, they can be longer if you're looking back on it. Like a great example of a brilliant memoir is Wild by Cheryl Strayed, where she looked back on her life and how she dealt with some trauma and her first marriage failing and whatever, and then giving it a kind of Hollywood treatment. If you look at the movie of Wild versus the book of Wild, it is the same structure, which is really rare. Hollywood tends to restructure things to give it extra drama, but they didn't need to for that book, and that book was a huge bestseller. So the stakes don't always have to be really huge. In that case, it was just about her figuring out what it took to be happy, and how to like deal with this thing about her mom, and just getting her life together. But she did give herself a crazy thing of writing that Pacific Crest Trail, which goes from apparently like Mexico to Canada. And it can take, if you do it, it takes 5 months and you could die. There's no internet, like you can't use your phone. It's like you're basically like, anyways, so that is a great story. And there's always an interesting memoir. My big memoir right now, which was on the New York Times list, is a writer who, well, she's a mom who wrote a book about how she and her husband, they have 2 kids, they have a brownstone in Brooklyn, how they chose to open up their marriage. And then all of a sudden, it took a while for me to find the right publisher. But what's exciting is that all of a sudden in the zeitgeist, people are talking about polyamory, the idea of loving more than one person. How does this work? And her story, so it's like, I loved it because it's like a roller coaster ride. And I said, this is a film. This is actually, I could see it. So that was why I was so excited about it. And even though I got a lot, like for memoir, for any nonfiction, publishers will push back saying this person doesn't have a platform. So Molly, the writer, had no platform, but the story was interesting enough that I kept trying and trying and trying. And then it debuted number 11 on the New York Times list. It sold out its first printing in 2 days. And then the New Yorker, the New York Times, New York Magazine, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, there's like 30 people that have interviewed her or talked about it. And now she's the face of polyamory, and she's starting to get like negative coverage because she's so big. And this is all in the last month. So it's exciting when that happens. But first of all, that almost never happened. It's never happened to me before. And I've been doing this for 20 years. But so much of a memoir is recognizing that somebody has a story and then finding the right editor. If it was a different house, I don't know that any of this would have happened. So that was exciting. So that's, I mean, I guess the thing is, if you look at the big memoirs that are out there, or even some of the smaller memoirs, and you feel that your story is equally compelling, then that's a start.
Thank you so much, Sam. That's wonderful insider information. Janice, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that was a pretty comprehensive answer. I mean, I would just sort of reiterate everything that Sam said, and like make sure that you know that a memoir is not an autobiography, and so it really does take, it really has to be a unique situation that you're writing about. Addiction memoirs are a dime a dozen. Like, I don't care if you've been an alcoholic, really don't, because like there's so many books like that out there. And unless something really extraordinary happened during your recovery journey, I'm not going to be interested in that. So, again, it would have to be, and it also has to do with the writing quality. You're telling a story no matter what kind of book you're writing. And if you're writing your own story, it has to be done well, and it has to be done in a way that's going to resonate with readers out there. So, memoirs can be really tricky, and big publishers like mine will say, well, what's your platform? Where's your audience? And who are you bringing to this? So, unless it is an extremely well-written and very unique story, wild, no one had, no woman had written about walking that trail. That's what gave it its unique quality. So there has to be something there unique and compelling.
Thanks so much, Janice. I'm going to just look at a pretty quick question here from the audience. Sam, you addressed this somewhat, but if an author were looking to publish a sci-fi specifically, who would you recommend? And any of the panelists can share if they have any insights on this, but I thought Sam might be a good panelist to answer this. So sci-fi, where should you look to publish or pitch to?
So probably the most important thing. Sorry, somebody's trying to call me. Let me just hit that. For sci-fi, the first thing would be to find an agent or publisher that is looking for the kind of thing you're writing. Now, if it's literary sci-fi, like Margaret Atwood has kind of cornered that space, right? And because of the book that became, from 20 years ago, that became a TV show that became an international hit. This is probably the hardest thing for you guys to understand unless you've been in publishing for a while, but the best thing you can do is find comparables for your book. And it's really hard because you have to start thinking like a marketing person. And so what a good comparable is, if you say, my book is kind of like that book and has a little bit of this book, but a little different. So we kind of want to, if we don't know you, if we don't know the work, if you give us some things like touchstones like that in the market, then we can imagine what your book is going to be just based on that, like one sentence. Now, Hollywood has made fun of this, but they do this all the time. It'll be like, oh, imagine if you had Sex in the City, but with guys. Well, that's Entourage, and you could just see how they do these shows and stuff. But so if you could figure out in terms of sci-fi is growing right now. So that's a good thing for those people that like trends and believe in them. You would want to find either a publisher or an agent who's looking for that. And you would have to look through what they've published recently to get an indication. That's usually the best indication, even though sometimes people are looking for stuff that they haven't done before, but they'll put that out. Usually they'll put it on their website or in their social media or whatever. So you need to do some homework. And if you find comparables to describe what you're doing, that will really help somebody understand it. It'll also help you understand who to approach, because if somebody has done, the publishers, everybody would know, for example, the 3-Body Problem, that book, which is going to be a big show soon. If you can say, if your book is that, you'd say some of these elements of that book plus this book, and that's what I'm doing, and I'm unknown, but here's what I have. They'll say, oh, well, we all know that, we know what that is, and you're going to add this twist to it, so that's exciting. We'll take a look at it. So it's just the beginning of the conversation. Having some good comparables really helps.
Thank you. That's great
in
advice.
any genre, but especially, sci-fi is very specific, and there's a bunch of subcategories. So like cyberpunk to like political intrigue sci-fi.
Thank you, Sam. And Janice or Anuja, did you have anything to add to this, or do you, or we're good with this very comprehensive and helpful helpful response from Sam.
I wasn't sure what the question, I think they wanted like suggestions on publishers. I mean, that sort of sounded like what it was. This is where, when we talked earlier about, you got to do your research. You've got to go use those tools and places that Sam talked about earlier. You have to go out there and find those places. There's too many publishers out there for us to know every single one of them, what they're looking for, what they're publishing, who's publishing them. That is like way beyond the scope of our ability to even retain that knowledge. So you have to go out there and do the legwork and look it up and go to the bookstore, see who's publishing what, look at the names of the publishers, go online, do your research. We have the internet now, which is a great resource.
So research. Yes, Anuja, did you have anything to add?
I would just say too, if you're writing like short fiction with fantasy elements, sci-fi elements, horror elements, don't be afraid to submit that stuff to literary magazines. I think there's a perception that, or maybe this was the case, years ago. I think it's very much changing though, that literary magazines are looking for those elements in work, and readers are looking for those elements in work. It still has to be a great, very well written story, but if you can include those kind of elements in your writing, especially in short fiction, I think a lot of literary magazines are very open to that now.
Thank you. So using different elements might help you to get your foot in the door at literary magazines in the genre of sci-fi. Thank you. Great. I'm going to look at the chat again here. We have a question from Gabby. Gabby says, I'm an international student who wants to publish in Canada, the English-speaking world. Would the process be different for me as a foreign national? Would anyone like to answer this, please?
No, not different at all. There's no difference. It doesn't matter where you're from when you want to get published in Canada, or even really anywhere. I mean, I think if you move to the US as well, the process is exactly the same.
The only thing it would affect is your ability to get grants, because you have to be a landed immigrant, at least, and citizen.
And maybe tax implications, right?
Thank you. That was pretty short. This is great. We're getting through a lot of questions. We have 10 minutes left, so I think we're doing wonderfully. The next question I'd like to throw out to any one of our wonderful panelists to answer this. Is it okay to resubmit a children's picture book to a publisher or agent if you've since been shortlisted for a national competition? Interesting question.
I mean, I'd say, yeah,
that's a good reason to reach out.
That's a good reason. That gives you a reason to resubmit, and it gives a reason for the agent or publisher to, pay attention and look at your work again. So I think that's a great reason to resubmit. So I don't see any problems there. I mean, unless you're submitting and it's not the kind of book that they're looking for. I mean, again, if it's not the kind of book the agent or the publisher is looking for, I mean, go back and think about what the reason it was rejected in the first place. And, you can win as many awards as you want, but if I'm not publishing that kind of book, I'm still going to keep rejecting you. So like, just make sure that's the reason. But if it was for some other reason, or it was a more nebulous reason, I would resubmit.
Resubmit, definitely.
And also, like, if you're publishing with like short fiction or short pieces in literary journals, and it gets published, and you get a number of publications, or you get a nomination like the CBC Short Fiction Award, or any other sort of journal award or nomination, that's also a great reason to resubmit and try to get new attention for your work at a publishing house or from an agent. All that kind of new information and success really feeds into the interest.
Thank you. Great advice. Next, I'm going to ask this question. Whoever would like to field it, that would be wonderful. Sophia asks, how are you dealing with generative AI, ChatGPT and such? Are you screening for use of it, or just trust authors to be original? Interesting question. Who would like to answer this? Anyone like to share their feedback? I think that's a good question.
We are not screening for it. We're assuming that if you're approaching us, that it's your own work, even though I think technically if you use something like that to do research, that's okay. And I don't think any publisher or agent would publish anything from ChatGPT, because it still seems often like it's written by like a preteen,
or a robot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, you have to remember that your book publishing contract has a clause in there that says this has been, created by you. So, you know, I don't know. So there's, potential there for, if you find out after the fact that someone didn't really write it themselves, there could be sort of grounds for a lawsuit maybe, or to cancel your contract.
Yeah,
But
people that are doing it have been public about it, and they've used it as a kind of feature as a
Mhm.
selling point. So Stephen Marche has written some books about it. He's Canadian, and Sheila Heti had a piece in the New Yorker that was, she says, this is me and ChatGPT together. So I think it's about your integrity as a writer, that you have to kind of fess up and say why you did it and how maybe it's an experiment. I mean, I think in the cases of those two writers specifically, that's what it was. But it was also innovative. It's like, what does a writer do with ChatGPT?
Mhm.
Thank you. Anuja, did you have anything to add, or you felt this was pretty thorough? It's been pretty thorough.
I think that covers it. I know that I think we have, on our submission guidelines something that says like we don't accept anything that's AI generated or something like that. But yes, it's exactly that anything that is written by AI still does not read like it was written by a human. And that's pretty easy to pick out. I was at doing like a workshop with a group of people, and they were so concerned about, we see these writers that are churning out 10 books because they're using AI, and it's through self-publishing, I suppose. But like, just a reminder, I guess, that publishing a book, if you self-publish, however many you do, publishing the book doesn't make you the writer. Writing the book makes you the writer. So focus on that.
Thank you. That's great. I can't believe we're almost out of time. We have 5 minutes, so maybe we have time for one or two more questions. The next question is from Glenn. I write religious nonfiction. How can I find an agent who has contacts and knowledge in that field? So based on our conversations so far, I think it's pretty straightforward. Research, research, research. Would that be an accurate response to this particular question?
I mean, it depends what kind of, I mean, if this person, sorry, is like a Christian publisher, there's Christian imprints at publishing houses, there's Christian publishers, assuming that that's sort of the religious area they're writing in. There are places that will publish sort of religious focused books, and so you just have to do your research.
Research. Absolutely. Yeah. Research, research, research. One thing I've learned from this panel, it's so important. Okay, I'd like to share one more question. I think it's probably best to wrap it up after this, just in case. I don't want to go over time. This is a very interesting question, in my opinion. So this is from Melissa. Melissa asks, is there an ideal manuscript word count for publishers or agents who will a longer word count be considered? I've heard from fellow writers that between 70,000 to 80,000 is ideal. But if the writing is spectacular, wink, does word count not matter? Interesting question. Who'd like to answer this?
I have
Dana?
I have very firm ideas about this.
Okay.
And my other panel colleagues may not feel the same way. I mean, yes, word count matters. I mean, there are times where, like, historical fiction, let's say, you can get away with a really long piece. And again, it depends on the book. Infinite Jest was, I don't know, what was that, 1,500 pages by David Foster Wallace. I mean, there are exceptions to the rule, but in general, there's a reason that publishers are looking for that sort of 70 to 85 word count. You don't want to have a 500 page book that could really be told in 300 pages. There's a lot of filler in there a lot of the times. A lot of authors, when they're not edited, really feel that every single thing is important. And that's where an editor comes in and can help them craft and shape the narrative. But like the British editors, can I swear here? The British editors call this fuck off long because it means we don't want to read that much. Like most books are not necessary to be that long. And so the other thing is an issue of economics. The bigger your book is, the higher the price point, because the higher it is going to cost us to print your book. And does someone want to pay $35 for a paperback book? I don't think so. So unless your story really needs to be that long, and that's something that could be evaluated again by the editor or by the publisher, there's no reason for most books to be more than that length. Again, some are longer, some are shorter, some are 100. I find that a lot of new writers have this weird unconscious cutoff point. They send manuscripts in that are exactly like 100,000 words because it's a nice like even number. And so I get a lot of that a lot of the time as well. But I do, as I said, I have very firm ideas about this. But again, it's a case by case basis. But I would say in general, no book needs to be over, really, really long.
Thanks, Janice. Any
yeah,
other? Yeah, Sam, please.
Yeah, I'd agree with Janice. At our agency, anything over 100,000 words, that's kind of like the way that Janice said, a lot of writers see that. That's kind of like a sign. So if somebody says my novel is 200,000 words, then we're like, yeah, no, we're too busy. We don't know. We don't even have like, that would be a week reading that book. We do other things, that we might never get again. But it's also why we ask for some sample chapters, because here's the thing. If your book is massive, but we're impressed by what you give us in the beginning, then we might want to have a conversation with you about why is it that long? If it's a genre book and you plan to continue it, which some people do, fantasy, for example, if you look at Lord of the Rings, it can get longer. I mean, a really good example of this kind of thing that happens is J.K. Rowling, when her first book came out, you'll notice that it was like 205 pages or something. So it was within that word count because she had an editor that said, JK, it's your first book. We're going to help you with it. But as she got bigger and bigger, she just said, no, just publish it as I wrote it. It's going to be 700 pages because at that point, she's JK Rowling. She's worth more than the publisher. So what are they going to do? Say no to her? The same thing happened to Ayn Rand when she wrote her epic books. Random House published her, and there's a great note about Bennett Cerf, who was the publisher and founder of Random House, who had a conversation with her, and then he's like, the editors are saying we need to cut this, Atlas Shrugged or The Fountainhead or whatever, because for those of you who've read it, it's kind of insane. It has like a speech that will go on for like 80 pages, and you're like, well, this is the same speech. You just most people would probably just skim it. But then she said to him, she's like, oh, Bennett, you would probably want to edit the Bible. So clearly she was like, at that point, she was not negotiating. She was like, I can go to any publisher because I'm Ayn Rand. I did The Fountainhead. So, and I feel like J.K. Rowling had the same kind of power where they couldn't edit her. And several other writers, I think James Clavell did a lot of big books. His Shogun, by the way, is coming out, I think, any day now. I'm so excited to see the remake of it. I saw the 70s version when I was a kid. But he had something similar where he's like, no, like, he got $1 million for Shogun. That was a big deal. He was one of the first writers to make that kind of money because it was so big and epic and whatever. So that, like Janice mentioned, historical fiction, sometimes a book has to be that big because the details, in that case, it was like medieval Japan, it was so interesting to people. People didn't know about it. But again, it's a lot of research that you're putting into the work to make it, to give it verisimilitude, to make it real.
Interesting information, Sam. I had no idea. Anuja, did you want to share any final thoughts on this question before we wrap it up? Well, I've learned so much from all of you today. I hope those who participated in our amazing Industry Insights panel learned and gained insights into this very competitive industry. You've all been so helpful. I just want to remind everyone a few things. The questions that we weren't able to respond to, I will be sending them to our panelists, and hopefully they will have a chance to respond to them, and then we'll share the answers on our website. And I just wanted to remind all of you to check out our other amazing services through Blueprint Career Services, and please do go on our website. But with that, we went 2 minutes over time. Which is fine, but I just want to thank our amazing panelists, Anuja, Sam, Janice. Thank you so much. And we really appreciate all of your participation today. And thank you to the audience out there. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all too.
Thanks.
Take
Yeah,
care.
thanks for
everyone.
having us.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.